Why emotionally strong men walk away silently. When you look at the modern world, you notice something strange. Men who appear to be the strongest, the calmest, the most centered are often the very same men who disappear quietly. They don't create drama, they don't argue endlessly, they don't fight battles to prove their worth to someone who has already decided to undervalue them. Instead, they walk away silently, gracefully, and with a kind of power that is felt long after their presence is gone. And the question many people ask is, why? Why does a man who has every reason to defend himself choose instead to leave with nothing but silence? The truth is, silence itself is not weakness. It is strength. It is clarity. It is the recognition that not every battle is worth fighting, and that sometimes the greatest power lies not in proving a point, but in withdrawing your energy from a place where it is not honored. An emotionally strong man does not walk away because he is afraid. He does not walk away because he cannot endure difficulty. In fact, his strength has been forged in difficulty. He has lived through storms, heartbreaks, betrayals, and disappointments. He knows what it means to struggle. He knows what it feels like to give his all and still not be seen. And that's exactly why he chooses silence. Because through experience, he has realized something that weaker men fail to understand. Words rarely change hearts that are already closed. Arguments rarely soften someone who has already chosen to misunderstand you. Shouting rarely makes anyone listen more deeply. Silence, however, cannot be ignored. Silence forces reflection. Silence is a mirror in which the other person sees their own actions more clearly. That is why the emotionally strong man walks away silently. His silence speaks louder than any speech he could give. You see, most men are conditioned to chase approval. From a young age, they are told to prove themselves, to be louder, stronger, more persistent. And so, when conflict arises, when a woman pulls away, when society challenges them, they are quick to push harder, to explain more, to demand validation. But the man who is emotionally strong has learned a different lesson. He has learned that not all approval is worth chasing. He knows that when love must be begged for, it is no longer loved. When respect must be demanded, it is already lost. And when presence is no longer valued, absence becomes the only dignified answer. So instead of arguing, instead of pleading, instead of lowering his standards, he steps back. He chooses silence not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much about his peace to let it be destroyed. Walking away silently requires immense discipline. It requires the ability to restrain your ego, to resist the temptation to make one final statement, one final attempt to be understood. Weak men cannot do this. They explode, they lash out, they beg, they dramatize, because they are ruled by their emotions. They cannot bear the thought of being misjudged, of not getting closure, of someone else having the last word. But strong men, they are not slaves to these fears. They have faced the pain of letting go, and they know that silence protects their dignity in a way that words never could. When a man has mastered his emotions, he no longer needs to shout them into the world. His presence has already spoken for him, his actions have already revealed his truth, and his silence becomes his shield. What many people do not realize is that silence is not an absence of communication. It is a different form of communication altogether. When a strong man walks away silently, what he is saying is, I will not fight for what does not want to stay. I will not argue with someone who has already chosen to leave. I will not waste my breath convincing someone of my worth. If you cannot see it now, nothing I say will change it. His silence is not emptiness. It is a statement, a decision, a declaration that his self-respect matters more than any temporary validation. This is why silence unsettles people so deeply. They expect anger, they expect confrontation, they expect drama. But when none of these things come, they are forced to face themselves. They are forced to wonder why a man who once gave them attention has now withdrawn it so completely. And that wondering often speaks louder than words ever could. To walk away silently is also to trust time. The strong man understands that clarity does not come through constant explanation, it comes through distance. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and let the absence speak for itself. A woman who took him for granted will notice the void. A friend who betrayed him will notice the quiet. A world that overlooked him will eventually feel the weight of his absence. He doesn't need to remind them. He doesn't need to explain himself. He knows that reality itself will teach the lesson. And so he leaves silently, but with the certainty that time will reveal what words cannot. But don't mistake silence for passivity. The emotionally strong man does not walk away and do nothing. He redirects his energy. Instead of wasting it on a battle that cannot be won, he invests it into himself, into growth, into discipline, into his purpose. His silence is not empty. It is full of focus, full of power, full of self-mastery. And this is the secret. When he walks away silently, he does not just leave someone behind. He elevates himself forward. He rises above the need for external validation and becomes stronger in his solitude. That is why silence is feared, because it shows he has options, he has control, and he is not dependent on anyone to complete him. In truth, the emotionally strong men understand something essential. Love without respect is not love. Attention without appreciation is not connection. Presence without value is not partnership. And so, when they sense that their presence is no longer honored, they do not beg, they do not plead, they do not perform. They simply leave, not in anger, not in hatred, but in silence. Because silence preserves their dignity, and dignity is worth more than any temporary affection. This is not coldness, it is wisdom. This is not indifference, it is strength. 2. Stay where you are. Not wanted is weakness. To walk away silently is power. And so the story repeats itself across countless lives. Women who once thought a man would never leave suddenly find themselves staring at the absence of his voice. Friends who thought they could betray without consequence suddenly find themselves facing a silence that cannot be filled. Societies that dismissed a man's worth suddenly find themselves missing the stability he provided, all because he chose not to argue, not to prove, not to beg, but to walk away silently. His silence becomes a haunting presence, a constant reminder of what they lost. And that, more than any word, is what makes the emotionally strong man unforgettable. There is something deeply unsettling about silence. Words, even when harsh, give people something to grasp onto. They create noise, they create movement, they create a sense of engagement, but silence leaves a void, and that void cannot be controlled. When an emotionally strong man walks away silently, it forces the other person to confront themselves in a way that words never could. That is why his silence is so powerful. It holds up a mirror that reflects not just what happened, but what was taken for granted, what was lost, what was wasted. And for many, that reflection is unbearable. You see, the reason women are often shocked when a man walks away silently is because they believed he would always stay, no matter what. They tested his patience, they challenged his devotion, they assumed his strength meant endless tolerance. And for a while, he gave, because he is not afraid of effort. But there comes a moment when the strong man realizes that his effort is no longer being valued. And in that moment, something shifts inside of him. He does not explode, he does not accuse, he does not make a scene, he simply detaches. His silence is his final boundary. It is his way of saying, without words, I will not continue to give or I am no longer respected. That silence, that absence, is far more painful than any argument could ever be. Because once it begins, it rarely ends. Society often misunderstands this. It tells men that they should fight for every relationship, that walking away is weakness, that silence is cowardice. But this is only because society itself thrives on noise. It fears the quiet man, because the quiet man cannot be manipulated. He cannot be dragged into endless debates, into emotional traps, into games of blame and guilt. He has chosen a higher ground, one where his self-respect matters more than the illusions of connection. When a man withdraws silently, he is not running away, he is stepping into his own sovereignty, and that sovereignty is unshakable. It is the strength of knowing who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. Think about it. Weak men beg, they shout, they explain, they demand closure. They are so afraid of being left misunderstood that they sacrifice their dignity just to have the last word. Strong men, however, accept being misunderstood. They know that truth does not need constant defense. If someone has chosen not to see them clearly, no amount of explanation will change that. So instead of exhausting themselves in a battle that cannot be won, they conserve their energy. Their silence is not a surrender, is a choice. A choice to rise above the need for external validation. A choice to protect their inner world. A choice to honor themselves more than they honor the opinions of others. And here lies the paradox. The more quietly a man leaves, the louder his absence becomes. People expect confrontation. They expect to feel superior, to win the argument, to walk away with a sense of power. But when he gives them nothing, no words, no reaction, no closure, they are left haunted by the emptiness. They replay the silence in their mind. They wonder what he is thinking, what he is doing, what he has become in his absence. And often, that wondering hurts more than any insult ever could, because silence is endless. Words fade, but silence lingers. In relationships, this silence becomes the ultimate teacher. A woman who once believed she could test his limits realizes, too late, that she has lost something irreplaceable. At first, she may feel relief, thinking his silence means indifference. But as time passes, the silence grows heavier. She remembers his presence, his attention, his devotion. And in the quiet, she begins to see that she mistook his strength for weakness. That she believed he would always be there, until suddenly he wasn't. This is why emotionally strong men rarely return once they walk away silently, because they understand that the lesson is in the silence itself. To return would be to undo the clarity they created. To return would be to dishonor the strength of their own decision. And so, they remain gone. Their silence becomes permanent. What's remarkable is how this principle applies beyond relationships. In friendships, in workplaces, in society at large, when a strong man is taken for granted, his silence becomes a revolution. He doesn't argue with unfair systems. He doesn't waste years fighting battles designed to drain him. He steps aside, builds his own path, and lets his absence reveal the cracks. A workplace that undervalued him suddenly struggles when his contributions are gone. A friend who betrayed him realizes the depth of loyalty they destroyed. A society that mocked his independence slowly begins to crumble without the stability of men like him. His silence is not just personal, it is structural. It reshapes the environment he leaves behind. But let us not forget, silence is not easy. It takes immense courage to hold your tongue when your heart is burning to speak. It takes discipline to step back when your ego wants to fight. It takes wisdom to realize that walking away silently will serve you more than staying and explaining. This is why only the emotionally strong can do it, because they have cultivated that discipline. They have learned that peace of mind is worth more than being right. They have embraced the truth that dignity is worth more than temporary attention. And they have seen that silence, though difficult at first, always pays back with clarity and freedom. In fact, silence is often a man's greatest gift to himself. It gives him space to heal, space to grow, space to redirect his energy. While others are stuck in endless cycles of drama, he uses his silence to sharpen his purpose, to deepen his strength, to become more than he was before. His silence is his sanctuary. It is where he rebuilds himself, where he strengthens his vision, where he prepares for what comes next. And when he reemerges not in the same place, not in the same relationship, but in his higher path, his silence has already done the work for him. Those who doubted him now see his transformation. Those who underestimated him now see his power. Those who lost him now see that his silence was not weakness, but prophecy. So when a man walks away silently, never make the mistake of thinking he has lost. He has won, because he has preserved the one thing no one else can give him, his peace. And in the end, peace is the true measure of strength. A man who can remain calm in chaos, who can detach in love, who can leave without a word yet carry no bitterness. That is the man who has mastered himself. And self-mastery is the highest form of power. His silence is not the absence of strength, is the proof of it. And long after he is gone, his silence will echo louder than any words he could have spoken. There is a certain weight that silence carries, heavier than any spoken word. When a man chooses silence, it unsettles those around him because they cannot predict him, they cannot manipulate him, they cannot trap him into a cycle of endless explanations. And this is exactly why emotionally strong men prefer to walk away without announcing their departure. Their silence creates a storm in the minds of others, a storm that keeps raging long after they are gone. It is not about cruelty. It is about choosing peace over chaos, dignity over desperation, self-respect over shallow validation. When a man leaves without saying a word, the people who once doubted his strength begin to question themselves. They replay every moment, searching for clues, wondering when he decided to detach, when he began to distance himself, when he stopped caring. This silent absence becomes a haunting presence. It lingers in the empty spaces, in the unanswered calls, in the conversations that never happened. And slowly, it teaches them a lesson no argument ever could. Never take the presence of a strong man for granted, because once he is gone, he rarely looks back. His silence becomes a line that cannot be crossed again. For the woman who underestimated him, his silence often arrives as a shock. She believed that she could push him, test him, take from him endlessly, and he would always return because that is what most men do. They come back begging, apologizing, fighting for scraps of affection. But when she realizes he is not one of those men, when she sees he is left without protest, the silence terrifies her, because deep down, she knows this is final. She knows that men like him do not play games. When they are done, they are truly done, and that realization can cut deeper than any goodbye. His silence also exposes the truth about others. Weak friends who once claimed loyalty are forced to see that their betrayals were noticed, even if not confronted. A workplace that thought he was replaceable suddenly struggles in his absence, realizing that his quiet reliability was the foundation they overlooked. Even family members who assumed his patience was endless begin to feel the sting of his distance. His silence is not petty, it is powerful. It is a withdrawal of energy, of presence, of effort, and that withdrawal reveals who truly valued him and who only valued what he gave them. But here's the deeper truth. Silence is not just about leaving others behind, it is about protecting the self. A man who has reached emotional strength understands that not every battle deserves his voice. He knows that speaking to the deaf, explaining to the unwilling, and arguing with the blind only wastes his energy. His silence is a filter, separating him from the noise of people who were never meant to understand him. And in that silence, he preserves his focus, his calm, his clarity. He redirects his energy from people who drain him to goals that build him. He invests in his growth rather than in empty conversations. This is what makes him different. He does not abandon himself while trying to fix others. Instead, he abandons the people who refuse to value him and stays loyal to himself. And over time, his silence transforms into strength. It makes him harder to reach, harder to influence, harder to control. Because once a man learns he can survive without explaining himself, he becomes untouchable. Words lose their power over him. Criticism loses its sting. Manipulation loses its grip. He realizes that peace is not found in convincing others, it is found in walking away when he must. This realization is why emotionally strong men are feared and respected. People may resent their silence, but deep inside they admire it because everyone wishes they had that level of control. Few do, and let's not mistake his silence for coldness. Emotionally strong men are not heartless. They feel deeply, often more than others, which is why they choose silence. They know the cost of wasted emotion. They know how painful it is to pour love, loyalty, and effort into people who do not appreciate it. They know how draining it is to argue with someone who only wants to win, not understand. So instead of letting that pain consume them, they step back. Their silence becomes an act of self-preservation. It is not that they don't care, it is that they care too much to keep destroying themselves. And here is where the paradox lies. Their silence often makes them unforgettable. A man who argues can be dismissed. A man who begs can be ignored. But a man who leaves silently lives in the memory of others forever. His absence cannot be explained away. It forces others to sit with the reality of what they lost. And in that stillness, regret grows. They remember his patience, his calm, his strength, and they realize too late that such men do not come often. His silence becomes his legacy. So when a strong man walks away quietly, it is not just an ending, it beginning. For him, it marks the start of freedom, of a life unchained from unworthy people. For others, it marks the start of self-reflection, of realizing what they took for granted. And sometimes, it even marks the start of change, because his silence forces them to confront their own flaws. Whether they grow or not is not his concern. His silence is not meant to fix them. It is simply his way of saying, my energy belongs elsewhere. And with that, he continues forward, leaving behind a silence that speaks louder than words ever could.